How's it going, guys? So, after quite a bit of exciting times for the franchise of Star Wars with The Mandalorian coming out, now we have The Rise of Skywalker, the last movie in the sequel trilogy, which has gotten a lot of mixed responses. It's gotten a pretty positive response from me here on this channel, especially though the Last Jedi, the last movie that was released in December of 2017. Many people had a problem with that film. To say that they had a problem with it would be a massive understatement. Many people bashing that film, and one of the things about it was very positively critically conceived. Or received rather. They really seemed to take to it, and the fans really didn't. And you could really see that juxtaposition when it came to Rotten Tomatoes, when you could really put those two scores together, and you could see that there was really a big difference of what critics wanted and expected out of Star Wars versus the fans. I actually sided with the critics. I don't think we had a lot of the same reasons for liking it. Maybe we did. But, a lot of those reviews that I posted, and I posted actually a few different reviews and a few different takes on The Last Jedi and what I liked about it and what I disliked. And, it led to a lot of arguments and a lot of disagreements. More people seemed to like Force Awakens, but the more time that passed from the release of that movie back in 2015, more people started to dislike it and found problems with it and said that it was more of a copy of A New Hope than anything else. And that kind of started as like a little bit of an observation, but then it grew and grew as time went on. But many people really despised what Rian Johnson, the director of The Last Jedi, decided to do with the franchise. And the other thing that's really interesting is a lot of the ideas that George Lucas had. He had like some small involvement with these films, but not much. A lot of his ideas were pushed aside. They were nixed. A lot of them went unused. And this was pretty controversial. But, a lot of people who really disliked the prequels and really hated the prequels. And I think it's probably time that we do another video on my appreciation for the prequels and how much I love those movies. And because I actually, believe it or not, I before I went to see this movie, it might sound really weird, but the movie that I watched was actually not Force Awakens, wasn't Last Jedi that whet my appetite. It was actually Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which might sound weird to certain people, but it is a movie that I really love and really enjoy. And I don't know what it is. You could say, maybe because that was a film that I grew up with in '99, but really, you can't really say that because there's a lot of people the same age as me who despise that movie, who dislike that movie. It's despised from people of all ages. So, whether you liked The Last Jedi or not, now is the last and final movie in the sequel trilogy, and that is Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. And J.J. Abrams was signed back on to do this movie. And, one of the things that's really interesting is that unlike the other Star Wars films, which was the original trilogy and the prequels, unlike George Lucas, these movies were not written out really with a goal in mind, at least not a clear-cut one anyway, that's been admitted. Like, you don't hear J.J. Abrams saying that he wrote Force Awakens with Episode 8 in mind, or what the conclusion was for Episode 9. It's almost like they were winging it, and there's no problem with that, really. I can understand if you kind of want to play it by ear, see how people react to the first movie before you move on to the next chapter. But, I thought that it was always an interesting thing to know with Lucas, that he always was thinking one step ahead and not letting you know what the next chapter of the story was and, how it was going to continue from that point. So, Not a lot of people seem to be mentioning that. They just seem to have different problems with the characters and the way the story is being told. Either the story is not being told well enough, or they just don't like the story or the characters in general. I happen to really think that Rey is a really good protagonist, a really good character. Definitely has that Luke Skywalker vibe, that Mark Hamill vibe, that very likable personality and look, and she continues that here. But, enough of all that. Let's get into the story. And there's some massive spoilers that need to be discussed here. So before you continue on, you need to basically either not care about going to see this movie with spoilers being told to you right now, or you just, you don't care. But otherwise, I would advise against watching from this point on. The movie is good. In fact, I believe it's actually quite excellent. I think that J.J. Abrams did a really good job telling this story, wrapping things up. It really ties a lot of things in from the original trilogy and the sequel trilogy, bringing that past in. It seems like maybe JJ might have a bit more of a liking for keeping Star Wars grounded in the original trilogy, where, despite the many criticisms of Rian Johnson, I like the chances that he took. I like that the guy made broad brushstrokes and just, changed things. And, I don't think a lot of people had the appreciation I did for, the fact that Luke Skywalker would maybe not be the same way that he was 20 years ago. People don't really take that into consideration. So that in mind, we've got JJ kind of bringing things back. We've got Emperor Palpatine returning, this was a very controversial thing. Many people accused JJ of being like, okay, you're kind of now trying to grasp at straws. You're trying to bring something that's extremely popular in Star Wars, an extremely popular, important character back from the past, when they've pretty much ridden this guy off and have done all they could really do with him. Turns out you see this movie and you realize that there's way more that they could do with this character. Way more possibilities, and the way that they handle Palpatine is excellent. What is the way that they handle Palpatine? That Palpatine is being kept alive by cloning technology, but it's more like he's, I don't even know why they said cloning technology. It's more like he's on life support, but I guess the body is cloned or whatever it is, but it doesn't really come off that way. But this was really cool, and you kind of see this right from the offset. And this is one thing that they've really tapped into in the sequel trilogy that I don't think George Lucas really ever got quite so far. The closest I've seen him get was maybe Revenge of the Sith, really diving deep into the Sith lore and really showing that the Sith are super evil, super dark, treacherous beings that are steeped in darkness, and it's almost like that uncomfortable darkness. And there's a lot of great tension that's built when you watch these characters, with Kylo Ren. These are dark, depressing, just blackened characters. And it seems based off of maybe the expanded universe and all we've seen, I will tell you where they really showed you, where you could see firsthand, how evil the Sith were. It was in those Xbox games, Knights of the Old Republic. They really showed, the Sith Temple and how, evil these characters are, and how evil this group is, and that they are they took something as great as the Force and turned it into something evil to use for their whims, and they expand on it a lot here. And it's a really weird place where Palpatine is on this planet. It's really eerie. When they finally show him at the end, it's in this like dark throne room. But before we get to that, let's discuss a lot of the other parts in this film. There's a lot of changes, a lot of different changes from The Last Jedi. One of the biggest things that's very noticeable here is Rose Tico. This character that was in Last Jedi, who was a really big part, probably the least popular part of The Last Jedi. She is like very, very minimalized, for being in that big casino scene and, doing all that stuff with Finn and the relationship at the end and the big kiss and everything. They have like completely done away with that. Her stopping Finn from making the ultimate sacrifice at the end of the film, that has been completely wiped away. It's pretty much because I think JJ saw like that fans really didn't like Rose Tico. They really did not like this character. They really weren't interested in having another like strong female character. I mean, she's much different than Rey. I mean, it's not even really a comparison, but they had completely like written this character off as being like one of the main crew, and it looks like JJ like cleverly just kind of put her there so she's there just so there's not any plot holes, but like the relationship angle is like gone. Like Finn is single again, man. He has no interest in Rose at all. It's almost like there is no past between them. And, when you watch these movies back to back, which, I mean, I didn't, but I could assume, when I do purchase this movie on Blu-ray or it ends up on Disney Plus, it's going to be really odd watching these films back to back. I mean, we're going to be sitting here kind of saying to ourselves, well, it's not like a small thing because Rose is in Last Jedi like a lot. She's not like Boba Fett. She's there like in a good hour of the film. I mean, you could like add up the amount of minutes that she's on screen. It's quite substantial. Like I said, it's not a minor character. She's there more than Leia. She might even be on screen more than Mark Hamill is, actually, when you kind of, like I said, if you add and tally it all up. So, as far as me, like, I didn't really mind. Like, going into this film, I didn't really say to myself, oh, wow, I can't wait to see more Rose. But I didn't really mind Rose. She wasn't one of my favorite characters in The Last Jedi. Like I said, my least favorite story arc from The Last Jedi was the casino scene. And, I kind of see the criticisms there. It wasn't completely awful. I think it definitely had a fun, entertaining vibe to it, and there was some things that I did enjoy about it. But yeah, like if I had to compare it to all the other story angles, like Poe's story, and of course Rey and Luke's, then of course it pales in comparison. So, but they've completely done away with her, and this is probably going to be a very big upside if you didn't like The Last Jedi and you really didn't like the casino story arc, and and you didn't like Rose, so that kind of works in your favor. So you've got quite a bit of surprises and differences. Another thing that's in here is General Hux, where they're talking about there is a spy, there's an informant that's been given, the rebels information, and this ends up being General Hux. Another character where even though he is revealed as being, the spy, the mole, there's, it's pretty much because he hates Kylo Ren. He disliked him. You saw that he almost tried killing him in The Last Jedi. But this guy is kind of dispatched, because they find out that he is the mole, and he's killed by Admiral Pride. And so, he kind of takes his spot. So it's like, I really liked Hux. I kind of like that guy's attitude, but they kind of minimalize his role in a way. where he seemed way more important in Last Jedi. Not really a big character, but they kind of whisk him away pretty fast. And so, that I guess you could say it's not a big substantial change, but they kind of just give this guy a little bit of a purpose in the film and then kind of just whisk him away. Just took a few notes here on different characters. Zori Bliss is another character where I don't feel like they really fully realize this is an old girlfriend of Poe. They kind of meet her. She's got a cool outfit and everything. She's like a criminal, a former rebel, I believe. And, this character is actually, believe it or not, this is Kerry Russell under the helmet, which I heard that she was in this film. I didn't know what role she was playing, but then I wikied it and found out that that's Kerry Russell. You don't even really get to see her face, but it's kind of, it's awesome that there's an actor of that caliber like in this film, but like this character isn't fully realized. We don't really learn a lot about her, and one part of the film we even think that she's dead, but we really don't seem to mind that much. But the character that is associated with Zori Bliss is Babu Frick, and this character is lovable. It's really hard to describe his speech pattern, but I could just say that the Star Wars franchise as a whole has been on a roll when it comes to smaller creatures. I mean, you got the Mandalorian with Baby Yoda, and then you've got this lovable little mechanic character that helps hardwire 3PO so he can like override the programming to decipher Sith text. And, it ends up wiping out his memory banks as a result. But this character, you have to see it, to fall in love with it. And, I don't know. I kind of would be surprised if you find it, like, annoying or off-putting, but I ended up loving it. There's also another droid, D0, which is like a cone shape. I found that J.J. Abrams did the voice for this character, which was pretty surprising, I guess. But this is another, like, having that droid paired up with BB-8, once again, like, I love these little characters that they put, these little side characters. As far as like BB-8, they don't really seem to have a big role for him in this film. Like, remember, like, R2 was like always there, and he's still there in this film, but like the droid roles are kind of minimalized. They don't really seem to have the same oomph or like anything really to them. And like, okay, you could say, but they've done enough with these droids over time. But there was a noticeable amount of like not a lot for the droids to do. But anyway, so we've discussed some of the characters. So let's and some of the little changes here and there. So let's talk about some of the other things. So like the big blockbuster bombshell that Palpatine is Rey's grandfather. I absolutely love this idea. I thought it was a phenomenal idea to make her a Palpatine. I don't know if this is what was planned from the start, as I was saying earlier, because you kind of look at this and you're like, you kind of look at Last Jedi and they said that they were like nobodies. Kylo tells her that they're nobodies. This time around, it's Kylo Ren who drops that bombshell on her, drops it on Rey, and he's kind of like he tried to protect her. But it's like, did they maybe just write that extra line of philosophy and dialogue and reasoning just to kind of protect it in the way, because they weren't sure if they were going to commit to Palpatine? What, I have to kind of think that Snoke was supposed to be in this episode, but until Rian Johnson did away with him in Last Jedi and surprisingly dispatched him and had him killed, it kind of would have, maybe been a little bit lame to bring him back so soon after he just died, in such an emphatic fashion. So, there's a lot of different theories that, that I would love to get these answered. Like, I really hope that they do a special on these prequel, on these sequel films. Like, they should definitely do an Empire of Dreams style documentary for the sequels, because with all the controversy circling around these films and everything that went into the creative direction and design of these films, it would be so interesting to learn like what Rian Johnson and what J.J. Abrams were thinking, especially going from episode 7 all the way to episode 9. What changes were made? What was storyboarded? What was not storyboarded? What was shoehorned in there at the last minute? What was planned years ahead in advance? Did they kind of have a story all ready to go, or was this how it was right from when they first envisioned episode 7 and having a sequel trilogy? I don't think it's that. I don't think that they had this all planned out. I think a lot of this was makeshift. I'm just saying, I think a lot of it was kind of, like I said, winging it, just kind of rolling with it. And this was a decision that if it was shoehorned in there within the last few years, and J.J. Abrams getting back on the project, I think that this was probably the best thing that they could have done, because it gives Rey a reason, validity. I mean, I get it, like, you know, about not. And Hello Greedo said this on his YouTube channel. He liked about Last Jedi that they made like Rey was a nobody, that she became a somebody from nothing. But I don't know, you know, you watch Force Awakens and you see her parents just blasting away in that ship, and you're just like, and you know that that's the parents, you know that's not like who it is, and like someone is kind of like holding her hand, and they kind of still never really explain like who that other person was. You kind of assume that it was Luke, but then The Last Jedi kind of just does away with that theory. And then, you know, I'm just kind of left saying to myself, you know, like, what really happened there? I think that that's kind of, maybe JJ maybe wanted to do something different with her. Maybe have her related with Luke, but that was like the most popular theory. I hear there were people thinking ahead of time that she was somehow related to the Emperor, but I don't really believe that. I didn't even really see that ever once. So with that in mind, though, this was one of the best decisions that I think that J.J. Abrams could have made, or that whoever came up with the idea in the first place could have ever fathomed. And I think it plays really well into this. And, you know, you kind of know that, like, Rey's not going to go to the dark side, but the fact that they even toy with it to the level that they do, and when she finally confronts Palpatine at the end. And there's a lot of beautiful shots in this film, like when they show that planet that Palpatine's on, and that big arena, and that big crowd, and you can't really see the crowd. You see they kind of have hoods on, like, who are those people? And they're like, I think that those were like the clone facility workers, and it was just a really interesting look to it. And then you see, like, at the end, you know, there's this whole big struggle, like, with Rey and Kylo Ren, and, you know, they have this big fight, and this is like one of the, like, such a great look here. And I kind of knew this was going to look pretty awesome. I didn't know if they were actually going to go on to it, but they did. And that is the wreckage of the Death Star when they find it, like, where it lands on that planet, and they actually fight atop it. I think that is great, and you see, like, helmets of stormtroopers, and it's just, like, destroyed, and it's like, they did a very good job of showing that and putting these sets together. I mean, like, these are awesome looking sets. I mean, I think out of all the sequel movies, this has probably had, like, the best set design and, like, planet design, and, like, you know, I really like the planet, you know, like the icy planet where they meet Zori Bliss on. Like, that was like a really cool look to that planet. Just a lot of variety here. So, you know, if you weren't into like casino planets in Last Jedi, you didn't get any of that here. And the other thing is, like, what's really funny is, like, I kind of wonder, remember, like, at the end of The Last Jedi, they showed that kid, like, that you know, that was working at the track at the casino. You know, he was kind of cleaning the stables and everything, and they kind of show him at the end, you know, like, he has force powers, and I don't know if they were gonna do something with that kid. I kind of thought maybe they were going to, but that's nowhere to be seen. I mean, they don't even like talk about that stuff. It's like Fight Club. They don't even discuss it anymore. So that's also like another really curious thing. I thought to myself, I mean, like, wow, all this is going on, and we're seeing the lore unfold and all that, and like these are really like show stealing scenes. Like I'll tell you something. Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley, like these are two actors that really are good on screen together. Like, when they're talking to each other through the Force, and like there's also now we learned something else. They kind of hinted at it a little bit in The Last Jedi, and JJ builds off of this concept about like reaching out through the Force, where the person kind of feels like they're in the room with you, and you kind of have to scratch your head thinking like, well, are they actually there or are they not? Because remember, then you've got that scene where you've got Rey on the planet with Luke, and she's in the hut, and then she's about to touch hands with Kylo Ren. They referenced that scene multiple times, so that hasn't been retconned. They're still talking about that, and they still build off of it. There's even one point where they're having like a lightsaber duel aboard, a starship, and like they're going at it, and you're not like, sometimes you're even questioning, like he's asking like, where is she? And you're like, but isn't he there? And then it turns out that he's not. And then you've got a part where like he literally like takes the necklace off of Rey, and he's not even there, but he has the necklace. So it's like they can pass items. And then you also see that there's also Force healing, which has always been a thing. This Force healing thing is a really interesting concept. They also showed it recently in The Mandalorian, where you saw Baby Yoda healing the Grief character, the Carl Weathers character, on that show. And this is something that was never explored in the movies up to this point. It was something that they showed in the video games and in the books and the expanded universe, pretty much. But they finally show it here. We see the healing powers like coming into effect, and like it's surprising. We see Rey healing Kylo Ren at one point, and you have to think like, where has this power been all this time? You haven't seen this in any of the other movies, and also this passing objects through the Force. It's like I like it though. It's like I like that they can expand on this idea that they don't just have to abide by whatever was in the original trilogy. Because remember, like, they added stuff in the prequels even that wasn't in the original trilogy. And it's like, you can't just abide by, like, these are the set of laws that this franchise, that this series has to operate under. And if you deviate from it once because you want to change it up a bit, you're going to risk upsetting people. You can't direct or make a movie with that mindset in mind. You have to kind of like, you got to have some creative freedom. And, I'm seeing this, that's what Rian Johnson did. What kind of person he is and what he said after the movie was released, I'm not really like caring so much about that when I'm talking about the movie itself. And I think that Rian Johnson had a lot of interesting ideas, and J.J. Abrams, I think he liked some of those ideas because, he could choose not to use those ideas, just like he chose not to use some of Rian Johnson's ideas, but he did take some of the ideas that were previously used and applied it to this movie. So, because it's as simple as that. If you didn't like something, you could just choose not to mention it. Hopefully it's not too big of a plot point, but like I said, a lot of this stuff they didn't have to. It was kind of, that was the good thing, that it was like open-ended, so if JJ wanted to do something a little different, there was enough wiggle room to do some slightly different things. But then you get at the end of the film, that they kind of band together. And they also, we gotta mention like Carrie Fisher, like how they put her in this film. That was really, really well done. Like to scrap that footage together, whatever they had left from The Last Jedi, they managed to put that in the film and it ends up looking really good. Like, it actually looks like she was supposed to be there. And then you see the part where she's walking away and she kind of wants to connect with, you know, her son Ben, connect with Kylo once again, and she does. And you see a lot of like a lot of character development in Kylo, and it goes back to like Darth Vader redeeming himself, and they kind of obviously did that as sort of a connection. Now, one of the best things is in the end scene when you finally have, you know, Rey face to face with the Emperor, and you know, you see the skylight opens up and she's watching this massive battle, you know, between his team, the Final Order, which is like his new empire, and you know, and the rebels, and they're completely outnumbered, and she's just there like watching it. And like, where have you seen that before? You've seen it in The Last Jedi, right? Remember when the Emperor's there with Luke, and you've got that little, you know, glass pane there, that window on the Death Star, and like Luke is forced to watch his friends just, you know, getting destroyed, getting hammered by the Empire. And like, that was a nice little callback, like I'm saying, with JJ bridging the gap between the old and the new, and kind of bringing it all full circle, because like, this is Palpatine, and this is his second chance at life, and he's going to try to make up for his past mistakes. But you know, he's still got that same vibe. He still wants to torture the heroes. He still wants them, still knows that the friendship and, you know, their loyalty to each other is also like their greatest weakness. So he's going to like torture Rey by showing her this. And that you know, was really smart on their part doing that. And I mean, it's really great seeing Ian McDiarmid like back in this role. It is just powerful. It's awesome. And you know, this was a really good finale. They gave, you know, the Emperor enough time. They made it seem like a real threat. And like, you always know that the heroes are going to prevail in the end anyway, because this is a serial style film series. But like, it's very well done. And there, you know, it was nicely laid out, I have to say, from the opening scene to the journey getting there. You know, you feel like this is a big threat, and it is, you know, good to see Palpatine. It's good to see Ian McDiarmid back in that role, and it was handled very well. It wasn't like, you know, oh, we're just bringing him back for the heck of it. You know, there was actually a reason. You know, this is her grandfather, and what a grandfather to have. Like, that's what I'm saying. What I thought was really awesome about it. Like, learning that fact really added a lot to this trilogy. You know, even if that wasn't the plan right from the start, and there's not like really a lot like hanging on that. Like, if you kind of watch the first and the second film, but you kind of see why Rey goes right to the darkness in The Last Jedi. So maybe they did. So it's really interesting thinking about that. And that's why I would love to see some type of documentary on these films, because now I'm kind of getting my wheels turning talking about it here in this video. I'm really thinking like there are some signs of it. There are a few particular moments in this series where you could see why this might make sense at the end. So maybe Rian Johnson did have an idea of it, you know, but then again, there is that mention of Kylo Ren telling Rey that her parents were nobodies, you know. So you really won't know until we get like a behind the scene look at everything. Another little interesting part is we do get to see a little bit of Luke training Leia, and first of all, this scene, like I will say this, like this whole movie looks incredible, but this one, and it is a brief scene of them showing like they're battling out like with helmets on, but then when they lift up the helmets, like the faces are CGI, and this scene, for some reason, I don't know, I gotta watch it again, but it didn't look as good of quality to me. Like, it seemed kind of like they rushed this part. It just did not look good. This is something that I hope that when they release this movie on Blu-ray or release it for streaming, they touch it up a bit. What happened to that great Leia CGI that was in Rogue One? I would love to see that come back, but like here she lifts up that the covering on the helmet for when they're like training, they're sparring together. So here's a little bit of the build off, like, and this is what's always curious. It's like, yeah, why didn't they ever really make a bigger deal out of like Leia being Luke Skywalker's brother? Like, why would she not want to be a Jedi unless she's connected with the Force? She just doesn't feel like doing it. That's why it was like such a big surprise, I think, when she like levitated back to the ship in Last Jedi, while a lot of people were like cracking up at this. And like I wasn't, because I was just like, okay, but she does have the Force in her. She must have that capability. If she's, if this is Anakin Skywalker's daughter, I mean, why would she not? But so they build off of this a little bit. They show that she is training, but she doesn't seem very Jedi in the prequel. So I don't know what they were really originally going for. Like I said, it's a big mystery, really, when you look at these films. It's really fascinating. But overall, this was a really enjoyable film. I really liked what it had to offer. It was a really interesting story arc, and at the end, we finally get what we wanted all this time. And you know what's really funny? My friend on Facebook, Cameron Morales, he always wanted to see Kylo Ren and Adam Driver and Daisy Ridley kiss, and we finally get the kiss at the end. And then we realize that like this time he heals, actually. Like after, there's this like great part where Palpatine sucks the life force out of both of them, and that like makes him more powerful, and he doesn't need to be aided by the machines anymore, and now you just see him standing alone in his own body. And you see that like he returns the favor. Kylo Ren heals Rey just as Rey did to him, just a little while ago in the film. And then, he gets injured, and he ends up becoming one with the Force, and you see like his cloak just floats down to the ground, just like with Luke Skywalker. Also, they see that Leia's body disappears as well. She becomes one with the Force. But before that happens, they engage in a romantic kiss, and I'm sure Karen is extremely happy about that. And I was too. I mean, that was a nice little touch. There definitely is like some tension. You look at them like trying to touch hands in Last Jedi, and you're like, yeah, there is something a little like sensual going on there. It's not just like, oh, we're business partners in the Force, and this is, strictly just business. No, you see that there is a little bit of like, hey, going on there, and there's like, there's definitely a payoff. So after you watch this film, you feel like a sense of gratification and satisfaction. It's a very satisfying conclusion to the story. Also, I want to also add, I'm sorry, it's a little bit all over the place because we were just talking at the end. There is another great scene that relates to the trailer. When they're back on, I believe they are at Tatooine at this time, or maybe I forget where they are at this point in the film. But they land on one of the desert planets, and you see in the trailer, Kylo with the TIE fighter. Rey does the flip and cuts it with the lightsaber. But after that, you see that Kylo Ren and her are like struggling over this ship because Chewie has been taken hostage, and they got him aboard this First Order ship, and it's like trying to fly away, and she's got a hold of it, and she's trying to bring it back down to the ground to save Chewie. And then but Kylo Ren is trying to like get it away from her grasp, and she's getting really like angry and frustrated, and all of a sudden force lightning just emits from her fingertips and the ship just explodes, and she feels that she's responsible for Chewie's death. And then we find out that Chewie is not dead later on, but like when the scene happens, we're like, whoa, she just killed Chewie because, you know, she gave into the dark side. So there's a lot of this going on, and I'm not remembering every specific part, but they do a good job up until when she meets with Palpatine, where you're like not sure, like, is Palpatine going to seduce her the same way she did with Anakin? You kind of figure it's not going to happen because this is the final chapter in the series, and you know that she's the protagonist and that they're not going to have her turn. And she doesn't, but, you know, it is really an interesting look at the Sith and, like, how convincing it is and the struggle that Jedis have, you know, with keeping themselves from turning to the dark side. And yeah, so anyway, guys, this was a great film. I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was fantastic. I liked most of what it had to offer. There was like I said, there was only like a few things in it where I was like, well, why did they have this? And, you know, why did they have that? And, you know, like there's also like another character that they meet up with. It's that that former First Order trooper that, and that's the other thing I have to say. Like, I kind of felt the sense like Finn also himself was a bit more like downplayed in this, and like you can see like he cares for Rey, and there's that part also where they're on the desert planet. Was it Tatooine? I just can't remember. You know, and they're going into that quicksand, and you're like thinking to yourself, like, what was he going to say? And then there's even a part where Poe even asks him, well, what were you going to say there? And you kind of figure he was going to say, like, I have feelings for you or something like that, or I love you. But, you know, that's kind of put on the back burner. So, like, what was there really, you know, there to say? And you kind of think with that other chick from the, you know, that says that she was a former stormtrooper for the First Order. Like, I don't know. I felt like, whoa, like, what is her purpose there? It's just like another rebel, I guess. But, you know, I thought maybe that she would have a purpose in the way that maybe this would be Finn's other romantic interest after, like, dumping Rose. But no. So, I mean, but that is really, like, minor stuff. I mean, it's okay if they want to have some characters, but it's like, usually in all the other Star Wars films, when there are characters introduced, they have more of a purpose. But, like, there were certain characters, like I said, even with, like, Zori Bliss, like, she comes at the end to help out, but, you know, they don't really elaborate on her enough, you know, so there is, like, more of a, I think, like, when Lucas had the reins, like, when he introduced a character, this character was there, and like really you could see like in his films like how that character progressed. Seems more like in the sequel trilogy, like there's characters, there's ones that are more important than others, and not all of them have to be there. They're not necessarily bad, but there could have been ones that were built off. But like overall, when there are any type of flaws that are at all visible in this film, they're really, really minor. Like, really, like, it's almost like, who cares? Like, if this wasn't... Because, like, overall, like I'm saying, this is a great story. J.J. Abrams told a really good story in this film. It was a great way to just end things and tie things up with a neat little bow. Like, okay, you want to know who Rey is? Well, you know, she's probably got one of the most famous grandfathers in all of the Star Wars lore. Everything, you know, with Kylo Ren is neatly packaged there. We even get a nice little cameo there from Harrison Ford, which I didn't even expect. But, you know, you get everything together. Like, now you know that Kylo is, you know, now one with the Force, and now he's together with, you know, the Force ghosts of Harrison, you know, Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher. You know, you have Han Solo and you know, and Princess Leia. It's just, you know, it's a nice little way to just wrap everything up in a nice little finale. So I don't know why the critics are really bashing this one as bad as they are. I don't see, like, why did they like, that's really curious about that, right? Like, why did they really love Last Jedi so much and really have an utter disdain for this film? Also, like, I see, like, you look at Rotten Tomatoes and they said the fact that, like, oh, all they did was fan service. Like, I get it. Like, sometimes fan service is not exactly what a film needs to make it a good film, but, like, why is that, like, a bad thing to do fan service? Anyway, I'm confused. Like, you look at the audience rating versus the critics and you see a clear difference, but also fans are really hating on this. I'm seeing a lot of videos across YouTube really bashing this film, and once again I have to, like, really ask, like why is this being considered so bad? What are you not really enjoying about it? Or like, is there, like, I tried to, like, put a few things here like out in this review, and I think I've been pretty fair, saying, like, maybe you didn't like this, and maybe you didn't like the way they did this with characters, and maybe things seem a bit shoehorned in there, or that maybe they put it in there at the last minute. But I don't know, to me it didn't really seem to matter that much, because at the end of the day, like I said, as long as we get a good story, that's all that matters. Anyway, definite recommendation for this film. If you're a Star Wars fan, obviously go see it. If you haven't been so crazy about the prequel trilogy, this one seems different. It feels a lot different than Force Awakens and Last Jedi. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are just not going to like it simply because it is the sequel trilogy, simply because it's not the original trilogy. And I see that is the problem, I think, mostly. People just want the original trilogy and nothing else, because yes, that was the best trilogy, obviously. Now if you ask me, like, how I rate these things, I don't really know. Like, I'm a big fan of the prequel trilogies, and I think that I actually prefer them over the sequel trilogies because it still ties into the main story, and I think that they're told quite well, despite what a lot of people say. And I really, like I said, even after watching Phantom Menace, I still have a great enjoyment for it. Nothing has really changed over the years. I think I actually like it more. Anyway, you know, we all have our different opinions, and I think some people go a bit overboard, but I guess that's what makes Star Wars great. A lot of different opinions. Where else would you get a debate like this with films, like with a film series? You know, you don't, there's 3 Godfather films. You don't see people debating these films as strongly. You know, like I'm saying, even popular film franchises. You don't see it. Look, there's even more Friday the 13th movies, or Nightmare on Elm Street movies, or Halloween movies. And there's big fan base for those films, but you don't have the same passion, the same importance to film as Star Wars does. And that's what makes it truly great. So, you know, commence with the debates, people, even if you want to hate on the film, but I sure don't. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed the film, let me know down in the comments. If you think I'm insane for liking this film, let me know that also. Anyway, subscribe if you haven't already. Click the bell so you get all notifications when I post on my new videos. And guys, thank you for watching. I will see you next time.